In Congress, the air turns electric as Jasmine Crockett goes head-to-head with Paul Gosar over the explosive charge of corruption. At the heart of their clash lies the battle between money power and accountability, a fight that exposes just how far influence can twist democracy. With fiery words and undeniable proof, the hearing spirals into a showdown that shakes both politics and public trust. Will Jasmine Crockett's stand-in Paul Gosar's career or ignite a revolution? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber roared with noise before the gavel even struck. Bright TV lights cut through the air, every camera locked on the stage, where reputations could be destroyed. Paul Gosar swaggered in chin-high suit pressed sharp. He leaned toward an ally and muttered with a smirk, "Another clown show from the Democrats." A laugh slipped out, dripping with arrogance, loud enough to sting. He carried himself like a man untouchable, mocking the room with every step. At the far end, Jasmine Crockett sat straight, unshaken. Before her lay a thick binder, silent, heavy, dangerous. She didn't answer Gosar's taunt, but her eyes did sharp, locked, unblinking. The whispers in the chamber grew rumors of emails, proof of corruption, a ticking bomb inside her hands. The gavel slammed. A hearing on financial transparency suddenly felt like a battlefield. One side cocky sneering, the other coiled tight, ready to strike. The duel had begun. The chamber had already been tense, but when Gosar leaned into his microphone, the atmosphere tightened like a wire about to snap. His voice carried a weight of arrogance, steady and booming across the room. He didn't even look at Jasmine. He spoke past her, above her, as if she were invisible. "I have served for many years without a single stain on my record. And those newcomers like Miss Crockett, they only chase scandals to get famous." The words hit the air like a slap. The silence that followed was deafening, every head in the chamber turning toward Jasmine to see if she would falter under the insult. His smirk widened, feeding off the hush, convinced he had drawn first blood. The silence didn't last. Jasmine's chair scraped as she leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him, like a predator sighting its target. Her voice sliced through the stillness, sharp, unwavering, amplified by the hunger in the room for a clash. "Mr. Gosar, I am not chasing scandals. I am chasing the truth. And truth is rarely kind to those who hide from it." Her tone was calm, but beneath it pulsed fire. Every syllable carried defiance and open challenge. Gasps rippled across the rose pens, scratched against paper, and the smirk on Gosar's face twitched, faltering, just for a heartbeat. But his pride pulled him back. He leaned into the mic again, lips curling in contempt, a laugh tucked in his throat. "The truth," he spat, feigning amusement. "I doubt you even know the difference between truth and the garbage tweets your side keeps spreading." His allies chuckled under their breath, the mockery echoing around the chamber like cheap applause. It was calculated humiliation designed to shrink her, to turn her into a footnote. The sneer in his voice dripped poison, daring her to respond. Jasmine didn't blink. She reached down with deliberate calm, her fingers brushing the cover of the thick binder resting before her. The scrape of paper against the table was soft, but ominous, drawing every eye. She lifted it slow and sure, the weight of it felt in the silence that followed. Her gaze locked on Gosar, cutting merciless. "If this is what you call garbage tweets," she said, voice steady as stone, "then tell me, Mr. Gosar, are you ready to explain the emails with your name on them?" Her words detonated like an explosion. The chamber erupted, gasps, whispers, chairs shifting, cameras snapping. Gosar's jaw clenched tight, his smirk thinning into a forced mask. He forced out a scoff, but the strain cracked through his tone. "Most likely another pile of fabricated documents," he muttered, trying to sound dismissive to crush the fire she'd lit. But the murmurs didn't stop. They grew louder, hungrier. Reporters leaned in, capturing every twitch on his face. Jasmine leaned forward, binder still in her grip, eyes never leaving him. Her voice dropped low and sharp, every word like a knife pressed to the throat. "Good. Then let's show the whole country whether I'm fabricating or whether you're the one shaking in fear." The room convulsed, a storm of voices and camera shutters. Every lens locked on Gosar's face, waiting for the crumble, as millions at home leaned closer to their screens. The duel had escalated, and Jasmine had drawn blood. The chamber shook as the first email blazed across the giant screen. The words appeared in bold, impossible to ignore. Secure additional support from the mining company. In return, I will ensure the favorable extraction clause is included in the bill. The room exploded with gasps and furious whispers, the sound of disbelief crashing against the walls. Reporters scrambled for their cameras, lenses zooming in on every flicker of expression. It was as if Jasmine had just fired the first shot in a war. Gosar sprang to his feet, his chair screeching across the floor, his face a mask of fury. His voice thundered like a cannon. You think a copy-paste email like this will bring me down? Your skills are still too green, Crockett. The insult cut like a blade dripping with contempt. He sneered as though the chamber already belonged to him, daring her to falter. The silence that followed felt like the air before lightning strikes. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locked like iron, her voice sharp enough to slice through stone. Inexperience does not mean inexperience with truth, and the truth is staring everyone right in the face. Her words rang out like steel on steel, shattering the illusion of his control. Reporters' pens tore across paper, the cameras snapped, and the balance in the room shifted. She had met his fury with fire of her own. Gosar curled his lip, his tone dripping venom as he lashed back. Why don't you try writing a Hollywood script that might suit you better than politics? The chamber erupted again, gasps, murmurs, even uneasy laughter from his allies. His mockery was vicious, theatrical, a calculated attempt to humiliate her under the spotlight. The sneer on his face was a mask hiding cracks already beginning to show. Jasmine rose to her full-height binder, still heavy in her hand. She thrust her finger toward the glowing screen, her voice exploding like a whip across the chamber. Hollywood scripts don't come with metadata. This is an official email from your system, sent on March 14, 2022 at 9:47 p.m., addressed to your senior aide, Daniel Whitaker. The digital signature attached to this message verifies authenticity confirmed by independent forensic analysis, and the company you pledged to Copper Ridge Mining Incorporated is the one you promised to reward with a favorable clause in federal law. The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted over one another. Cameras zoomed so close that Gosar's reddened face filled the feed. A few lawmakers dropped their heads into their hands, others shook with disbelief. Gosar's fists clenched until his knuckles turned white, his face boiling red as he glared across the table. The power he carried into the room was slipping piece by piece right in front of millions, and Jasmine's eyes, burning like fire, delivered the final sting of this round. This is just the opening act. The line landed like a blade to the heart. The room fell into a stunned, breathless hush because if this was only the beginning, then the storm still waiting in her binder would be devastating. The chamber was still reeling from the first revelation when Jasmine struck again. She tapped the screen and a second email flared into view, time-stamped in bold at the top. April 22nd, 2022, 10:32 p.m. The header showed the recipient to Daniel Whitaker, senior aide. Beneath it, the words cut like steel. The support from them has arrived. I will handle the insertion of the clause into the bill. The metadata confirmation line at the bottom read, verified digital signature, Paul A. Gosar. The chamber froze. Every camera zoomed tighter, every reporter's pen scratched harder. This wasn't rumor. This was the smoking gun, time-stamped, addressed, authenticated. Then Gosar exploded. He slammed his palm against the desk with a crack that made the microphones shake. You are nothing but a tool. Everyone in this Congress knows you're nobody, just someone chasing 15 minutes of fame. His voice thundered, spitting venom, but it carried the tremor of a man rattled to his core. The louder he screamed, the clearer it became. He was unraveling in real time in front of millions. Jasmine stepped forward only half a stride, but it felt like a strike. Her eyes burned, her voice sharp as a drawn blade. If I'm nobody, then why are you shaking and screaming? It's not me you fear, it's the truth. The chamber shuddered with murmurs, gasps, the sense of blood in the water. Gosar's face twisted with rage, his hands gripping the desk, and he roared again. Fake, all of it is fake. Jasmine's response was ice-cold, steady, merciless. Fake. This is the result of independent forensic analysis. Do you want me to call them into this chamber right now? She let the words hang like a trap snapping shut. Gasps erupted, cameras clicked furiously, and lawmakers glanced at each other in disbelief. The chairman's gavel slammed down, but his shouts for order were drowned by the roar of chaos. Outside the chamber, the story was already exploding. Reporters typed furiously, networks broke into live coverage, and the revelation began spreading like fire. Gosar collapsed back into his chair, eyes blazing with desperation, chest heaving, his fury now edged with fear. Jasmine didn't move. She stood tall, fire in her stare, her voice cutting through the storm like a blade through armor. This is not a witch hunt. This is an excavation of the truth. The words landed like a death sentence. The chamber didn't just tremble, it erupted, the whole nation watching as Gosar sat cornered, exposed and powerless against the avalanche of evidence crashing down on him. The chamber was still in chaos from the second email when Jasmine delivered the final strike. With a single command, the screen blazed again, brighter, deadlier. This time it wasn't an aide or a staffer, it was direct, personal, undeniable. At the top of the projection in bold, the timestamp burned, May 6, 2022, 11:14 p.m. Below it, the recipient line froze the room. To Michael Harrington, CEO, Copper Ridge, Mining Incorporated, and then came the dagger, the body of the email itself. Thank you for the $5,000,000,000. The clauses will be taken care of immediately and will be passed in the bill next week. Underneath, sealing the horror, the digital stamp glowed like a brand-verified signature. Paul A. Gosar. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She pressed another button and a new slide filled the screen. It was a scanned bank statement from First National Bank of Arizona. The transaction was there in black and white, $5,000,000,000, wired directly from Copper Ridge Mining to a PAC controlled by Gosar's office. The date and time matched perfectly with the email. The chamber's silence was absolute, like the world had stopped spinning for a heartbeat. Reporters froze their pens, hovering midair. The walls themselves seemed to lean in to watch. Then a whisper cracked the silence. A congressman leaned toward his colleague, his voice barely audible but still caught on microphones. This is the end. The words echoed like a gavel, heavier than any formal ruling. In that moment, every person in the chamber knew they were watching history. Gosar's collapse was visible, brutal, impossible to hide. His skin drained of color, his lips quivering as he tried to conjure words that refused to come. His eyes darted from the screen to Jasmine, then back again, like a trapped animal searching for an exit that wasn't there. Finally, his voice staggered out, broken and weak. I don't remember." The pathetic words rang hollow, drowned under the weight of the evidence towering above him. Jasmine didn't let him breathe. She cut him off instantly, her voice cold, sharp, merciless. "Your memory cannot erase digital evidence." The line slammed down like a hammer, every syllable a strike. The gasps that erupted were thunderous, rolling through the chamber in waves. Reporters scrambled for their laptops, desperate to get the words out first. Cameras zoomed closer, tighter, until Gosar's face, ashen, sweating, broken, was all the nation could see. The chamber could no longer contain itself. Applause erupted, sudden and deafening, breaking every rule of decorum. Hands clapped, voices rose, some shouted in open vindication. It wasn't polite applause. It was raw, furious, cathartic. Security guards rushed to intervene, but the crowd couldn't be silenced. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the sheer force of the moment, history breaking open in real time. And still Jasmine stood calm at the center of the storm. She didn't bask in the noise, didn't smile, didn't even flinch. She waited until the clamor dipped just enough, then leaned into her microphone. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like a blade drawn from its sheath. "You sold the voices of your constituents. I am here to take them back." The words struck with finality. The applause stopped, not from restraint, but from awe. Every eye turned to her, every camera locked in. Gosar slumped in his chair, sweat-dripping, chest heaving like he'd just been beaten on the floor of the chamber. His career, his shield, his arrogance, it had all been shredded by a single email and the woman who dared to expose it. The duel was over, and America had just watched it live. Moments after the chamber's roar subsided, the shockwave jumped from the hearing room to every screen in America. Newsrooms smashed, the breaking alert studio lights flared, and producers barked into headsets as feeds rolled. CNN cut in mid-program with a blood-red banner stretching across the bottom of the screen. Email evidence exposes corruption, Gosar cornered. Anchors spoke in clipped urgent tones while a split screen replayed the damning email beside Jasmine at the microphone. Analysts traced the timeline frame by frame, matching the bank statement to the messages like evidence tags on a table. Every replay tightened the narrative, and with each pass, the story spread faster, city to city, phone to phone. Phones lit up as push alerts crashed into home screens nationwide. Fox News tried to spin it, but the digital signature made it impossible to deny. A primetime host framed the uproar as partisan theater, only for a cyber forensics expert to explain calmly that the signature was a cryptographic match to Gosar's official certificate. The panel stumbled as graphics popped up with overlays of the signature block, the timestamp, and the routing details from the statement. Viewers watched the defense wobble while the evidence kept looping date, amount, recipient stamp again and again. Producers cut to Capitol Hill correspondents who whispered that staffers were rattled and corridors had gone strangely quiet. On-screen polls snapped upward. A majority of viewers called the proof decisive, and the network moved on to the next uncomfortable question. Inside the party, the split was immediate and sharp. Some Republican figures went silent, issuing no statements and letting press calls ring like alarms no one dared answer. Others stepped to microphones with tight faces and careful phrases condemning any corruption wherever it's found, while dodging direct questions about Gosar by name. A handful were blunter, calling the emails disqualifying and warning that public trust had been torn open. Leaks trickled out closed-door texts, panicked group chats, and aides asking lawyers for guidance before the morning shows. Reporters cataloged the reactions with brutal efficiency, charting who stood back, who hedged, and who finally broke ranks. Back in Arizona, the reaction was raw and loud. Constituents flooded district offices with angry calls, demanding a resignation, and voicemail boxes hit capacity before noon. At coffee counters and union halls, people replayed the clip on phones, pointing to the signature and the $5 million line and saying, "That's it, he's done." Outside the Phoenix office, a crowd formed with handmade signs, and the chant rose over traffic lights and sirens. "Resign now." Local radio went wall to wall with callers, veterans, and teachers, and small business owners, each repeating the same sentence in different voices: "He sold us out." By dusk, county chairs were drafting statements while donors quietly asked for refunds and volunteers peeled their stickers off bumpers. Through it all, the national narrative hardened around a single image: Jasmine, stepping into the light while the chamber thundered. Editors chose the freeze frame of her standing, tall at the microphone binder at her side, eyes locked forward as if daring the country to look away. Headlines praised her poise under fire. Opinion pages called the day a rare moment when evidence finally outweighed noise. Commentators said the spectacle delivered civic clarity, the kind that cuts through fatigue and cynicism and reminds people why hearings matter. In segment after segment, one phrase kept returning, spoken with a mix of admiration and relief: the guardian of justice in Congress. By nightfall, the story was no longer just about a scandal. It was about a standard and the woman who enforced it in plain view. As the broadcast dust settled, the internet took over like a switch had been thrown. Within minutes, the YouTube clip of Jasmine unveiling the emails shot onto the trending page and never left. The title was simple: the thumbnail, a freeze frame of her finger aimed at the screen, and the counter spun like a slot machine, 1,000,025, until it blasted past several million views in under 24 hours. Autoplay pushed it into living rooms and break rooms. Notifications pinged across phones and comments stacked into a towering wall of fire. Creators sliced the exact 5 seconds where Gosar froze and looped it with heart-pounding stings. News channels embedded the clip and sent it back into the algorithm's bloodstream. The chorus underneath was relentless receipts, evidence, impact, no fluff, no spin. Late-night talk shows pounced before the ink dried on the headlines. Monologues opened with the moment Gosar's voice died in his throat, replayed in slow motion, then side by side with the bank statement like a heist reveal. The audience reaction was instant groans, sharp laughter, then an audible gasp when the digital signature flashed. One host leaned into the camera and whispered, "That's what you call a paper trail," and the studio cracked up while the clip rolled again. Another show ran a truth cam graphic that pinged whenever the signature appeared, turning the replay into a strobe of accountability. By midnight, every major desk had aired the choke point, and the silence in that chamber had become the loudest sound in America. Across social platforms, the reaction didn't just trend, it erupted. Comment threads formed a single sentence in 1,000 voices. This is why we need financial transparency. People pinned it to the top of their feeds, printed it on digital posters, and made it the caption under screenshots of the email. Longtime viewers who never commented showed up to type, "Finally proof," while veterans of political threads wrote, "Bookmark this, this is the standard." Editors posted split-screen breakdowns with arrows and highlights, and civic teachers clipped the moment into their lesson plans. The mood was unmistakable, a rare, clear, collective demand that the money behind the curtain step into the light. Then came the petition, clean-focused, undeniable. A single page called for immediate lobbying reform, donor disclosure, and hard walls between lawmakers and corporate money, and signatures flooded in by the hundreds of thousands. The live counter ticked upward like a heartbeat as unions, veterans groups, and small business coalitions shared the link within minutes of each other. Local organizers stitched together watch parties and turned them into signing drives. Church groups passed the QR code down pews. Barbershops and diners taped it to the register next to the tip jar. The site staggered under the traffic, recovered, and then surged again as morning shows read the numbers on air. By night, the petition had become its own headline. The public wasn't just nodding, they were signing. Out of that surge, an image crystallized: Jasmine as the new standard bearer, the calm at the center of the storm. Profiles called her unflinching. Banners dubbed her the one who brought the receipts. Commentators settled on a single line that followed her from screen to screen: the guardian of justice in Congress. Posters appeared online with that moniker set over her silhouette at the microphone binder at her side like armor. Young staffers clipped her quotes to their desktops. Watchdog groups made her moment the opening shot in presentations titled "How Accountability Looks." And across timelines crowded with noise, one figure stayed clear: a lawmaker who didn't blink when power stared back. The virality didn't stop at views. It morphed into something messier, louder, and impossible to ignore. First came the meme, simple, brutal, everywhere at once. It was a freeze frame of Gosar's stunned face, beads of sweat on his brow under a slab of scarlet text that screamed, "Busted," in block capitals. People screenshotted it from the hearing and slapped it on t-shirts, coffee mugs, and profile banners by noon. Group chats turned it into stickers. Newspapers found it taped to office doors. The image moved faster than any op-ed ever could, a verdict rendered by the crowd and pasted across every corner of the internet. Then the sound followed the picture. Editors and creators ripped the moment Jasmine leaned into the mic and dropped the line, "Your memory cannot erase digital evidence." They spun it into a dozen styles: a bass-heavy trap remix for gym reels, a courtroom drama sting with strings and timpani, a whispered ASMR loop that somehow felt even more savage. Parody clips reenacted the exchange with rubber gavels and toy microphones ending on the same cut, Gosar frozen, the quote crashing in like a cymbal. DJs slipped the sample into late-night sets. Phone screens lit up as people Shazammed a political line like it was a new hook. The soundbite stopped being a sentence and became a siren. The streaming giants smelled a moment. Within days, development calls were happening on both coasts and decks were flying across inboxes with bold black titles. Executives at Netflix and Hulu began circling a documentary concept with a name that felt like a poster already: Hidden Emails, the Fall of Gosar. Producers mapped out a cold, open on the gavel, strike a mid-episode reveal with the bank statement, and an end sequence that held on Jasmine's stare for a full 10 seconds. Talent lists grew: forensic analysts, campaign finance watchdogs, even a retired clerk who could explain digital signatures to a primetime audience in under a minute. The pitch wasn't politics, it was a thriller, a paper trail heist told in plain sight. Out in the real world, the story walked off the screen and sat down at the table. In cafes and diners, older regulars argued with the gentle heat of people who have seen too much to be surprised, and yet were shaking their heads over mugs as they replayed the clip. "This is why you track every dollar," one man said, and the counter hummed with agreement. At the same time, teenagers and 20-somethings chopped the quote into 10-second loops and launched a TikTok trend where creators flashed before-after receipts, tuition bills, hospital invoices, rent hikes right on the beat. Teachers used the meme to kick off civics lessons. Librarians built pop-up displays on transparency. The same moment that stunned a hearing room started a conversation between generations. By week's end, it was bigger than a scandal and sharper than a headline. It was ritual, shorthand, a cultural stamp pressed into the moment. The meme with busted became the new reaction image when a lie collapsed in any context. The remix with your memory cannot erase digital evidence. Scored everything from explainer threads to dance edits, a trumpet blast for accountability. Trade reporters wrote about Netflix and Hulu circling hidden emails the fall of Gosar. Like it was a franchise launch. And in that swirl between the coffee steam and the TikTok beat, the event stepped out of politics and into pop culture, not as a fad, but as a marker, a clean, hard story about proof power and the one voice that cuts straight through the noise. By the next morning, the fight moved from screens to institutions. The House Ethics Committee moved first, convening in a brisk, closed-door session that ended with a terse statement and a single phrase that landed like a verdict: formal investigation. Staff were ordered to preserve all records. Subpoenas began rolling out for emails, drafts, calendar entries, and phone logs. Committee counsel briefed reporters in plain language they would follow the money match messages to movement and interview everyone from senior aides to the intern who scanned documents. A timeline was set, weeks, not months, and the chair warned against public interference. Let the facts speak. In hallways suddenly lined with cameras, aides hustled past, clutching binders stamped with the ethics seal like evidence kits. Then justice weighed in. At Main Justice, the Public Integrity Section opened a preliminary review and requested the full evidentiary packet from Congress, emails, bank statement, and the digital signature verification. Prosecutors began sounding out grand jury availability, while agents drafted preservation letters to ensure no records were wiped or archived by accident. The language was careful but unmistakable. The Department of Justice was considering bribery and public corruption charges. Former federal attorneys on cable news explained the thresholds in straightforward terms. Quid quo and the link between them and the paper trail already looked like a straight line. Behind the scenes, investigators started mapping who approved what, when, and why. Markets reacted like a struck nerve. Copper Ridge Mining Incorporated opened down hard, its stock plunging at the bell until trading halted on volatility. Minutes later, the company issued a two-paragraph statement. It categorically denies any wrongdoing, acknowledges a $5,000,000 political contribution routed through a registered PAC, and insists it was lawful and disclosed. The wording did not stop the slide. Analysts flagged regulatory risk, bond desks widened spreads, and a credit watchdog slapped the firm with a negative outlook. By afternoon, the company scheduled an emergency board call, and investors whispered about leadership changes if the storm grew teeth. In mining towns where Copper Ridge trucks are a daily sight, the headline alone sent a chill through union halls. Gosar's legal team tried to stem the bleeding with a single claim hack. Outside the courthouse steps, his attorney told microphones the emails were compromised by unauthorized access, suggesting manipulation, and insisting no responsible office would treat them as genuine. But within hours, independent examiners retained by the committee stepped forward. The forensics confirmed authenticity. They explained it simply: cryptographic signatures matched Gosar's official certificate timestamps, aligned across systems, and the chain of custody for the bank statement was intact from issuer to investigators. A committee technologist added in plainer words, "If you sign a document with your government seal, we can tell." The hack narrative withered under the lights. Consequences closed in on two fronts at once. In the chamber, members circulated drafts for censure, while others counted votes for something rarer: expulsion. Back home, donors froze contributions, local leaders called for accountability, and polling firms detected a sudden, sharp swing against the incumbent. Commentators put it bluntly: Gosar faced the risk of losing his seat and possibly facing trial if prosecutors filed charges. Jasmine, refusing to let the moment pass, a spectacle, stepped to a lectern with a stack of pages and a title that read like a promise: the Constituent Integrity and Transparency Act. The bill would wall off corporate money from pending legislation, require 72-hour real-time disclosure of any PAC contact, mandate independent audits of congressional communications, and impose criminal penalties for pay-to-play schemes. She closed with one sentence that rippled outward. Sunlight is not a slogan, it's enforcement. The storm inside the chamber had ended, but the meaning of it all was only beginning to settle. Politically, the message was sharp and unshakable. Corruption can hide, but it cannot survive forever when someone dares to stand up. Jasmine's confrontation made it clear that even in a world built on influence and backroom deals, truth had the power to cut through. Lawmakers whispered in corridors, donors rechecked their pledges, and voters replayed the moment over and over. What could have been just another headline became a warning flare. Power is not immune when evidence is undeniable. The sight of a congressman cornered by his own words sent a ripple through every office on Capitol Hill. Socially, the verdict belonged to the public. People cannot simply surrender their trust. They need stronger systems of oversight. The hearing forced that truth into the open. Constituents who once sighed and shrugged at scandals now demanded reforms out loud, calling radio shows, posting petitions, filling inboxes with letters. Coffee shop conversations turned to campaign finance, and church bulletins carried reminders about accountability. The chamber had exposed more than a man, it exposed a structure, and the call to guard it louder than before. The cinematic close arrived as Jasmine walked out of the Capitol, the marble steps glowing under the camera lights. Reporters surged forward, flashes, exploding microphones thrust into her face. One voice cut through the frenzy with the question everyone wanted to ask. "Are you afraid?" Jasmine paused, turned her gaze straight into the lens, and answered without hesitation. "What I fear most is not them. What I fear is that people will stop knowing the truth." Today they saw it. The silence that followed her words was heavy even among the shouting press, as if the air itself bowed to the weight of her reply. And with that, the closing message came like a drumbeat, final and unforgettable. Democracy does not exist because of promises. It exists because people are willing to confront lies. The line hung in the air like a verdict carved in stone, a reminder, a warning, and a call. The camera lingered as she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind not just a scandal, but a story that would be told as long as people cared about truth. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.